So, why don't we change gears here for a second? A couple more questions to get through that I think are really good, and I want to make sure we get to them. Um, Someone on our forum named N Cruelty, he wants to know if veganism is similar to a religion because it involves strict adherence to guidelines that require that we avoid animal exploitation. What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, well, no, I mean,
I mean,
is it like a religion? I mean, look,
I don't think so,
we
but
have all sorts of absolute. I mean, I'm absolutist about a whole bunch of things in my life. I'm
sure.
absolutist about child molestation. I'm absolutist about rape. I'm absolutist about animal exploitation. I'm a vegan. Nobody ever asks me if I have religious views about rape and about child molestation because I absolutely reject them. It's only when you get to animal issues and you say, well, look, I'm absolutely opposed to animal exploitation, just like I'm absolutely opposed to various forms of human exploitation. I mean, I think in certain ways, and again, I'm not saying that and cruelty is speciesist. I'm saying
Sure.
that whenever I get the question, aren't you being absolutist? I always say yes, and proudly so, just like I am about various forms of human exploitation. And so the fact that I'm absolutist when it comes to animal exploitation, I don't see that as a problem. Not for me. It may be a problem for you, but I mean, I don't. I see to the extent that you say, well, your absolutism about animals is somehow problematic. My response is, well, that's because you think that discrimination on the basis of species is somehow not as serious as discrimination on the basis of other sorts of criteria relating to humans. And I don't rank evils. I don't believe in ranking evils. I mean, I simply don't. But I mean, all forms of discrimination have their particular characteristics, but they share in common the commodification of the sentient other, and in that sense, they're all the same. There are differences. Sure, there are differences, but they're all the same. And so my view is, hey, I don't like any of them, and so do I regard this as a religion? No more so than I regard my feelings about child abuse, or abuse of women, or abuse of anybody else,
Sure.
or discrimination against anybody else. I mean, one thing I think that is problematic, I think there is a cultish aspect. I'm sorry, but I believe that there is a sense in which the modern animal movement is very much a cult, in the sense that we don't have these discussions about these sorts of issues. I mean, the three of us are having it on your podcast, and I have it with a variety of people, and you have it with a variety of people. But the bottom line is, these discussions don't go on at the level of the national organizations, because there is a movement in which you have people like Peter Singer, who takes the bizarre positions. I mean, that it's all right for us to exploit people who are mentally challenged, or that it's all right for us to have sex with animals as long as they consent to it, and we take them to dinner and a movie before we have sex with them, or whatever he says. And so you have Singer saying these in my judgment, bizarre things. You have Newkirk, who takes the position that animal rights is dead. The only good animal is a dead animal. You have these bizarre positions, and if you even question them, I mean, if you even say, "Gee, I'm really concerned that people are articulating the positions that it's all right to have sex with animals under certain circumstances, or that that the only good animal is a dead animal. We ought to try to kill every animal we can because there are no bad homes in heaven," or whatever. If we even question these things, then we're being divisive and we're harming animals. I think that starts smacking of cult behavior.
Absolutely. No, I was going to say, recently we've been accused of our abolitionism being politically divisive, and I think it's an absurdity. I mean, it's just an absurd argument to argue that abolitionism is politically divisive. I mean, why is not welfarism politically divisive from the true?
But that's no different though than the argument that if you criticize what's going on in Iraq right now, you're giving aid and comfort
That's right.
to terrorists.
That's right.
If you disagree with us, you're a bad person.
Yep.
This is presently the level of discourse. If you disagree, then you're harming the thing you claim to care about. And I don't see the discourse in the animal. I mean, look, the two of you have been doing this a lot. You've come to it more recently than, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time now. If I had 5 cents for everybody who said my positions on animal rights were divisive, I would be able to retire now. Because I mean, let me tell you, when I wrote Rain Without Thunder, in which I took the position that the rights position was different from the welfare position, and that the rights position was in danger of collapsing into the welfare position. What's happened since I wrote that book is it has collapsed into the welfare position, but that's what I was arguing in '96.
Sure.
When I wrote that book, I actually received hate mail, including death. I received some very nasty mail from, quote, animal people, end quote, who were very angry that I criticized PETA and Farm Sanctuary and all these other groups, because I disagreed with their positions. Again, I never went after anybody personally. I just said, look, I disagree with these positions. I think that PETA's position on sexism is wrong. I think their position on killing healthy animals in sanctuaries is wrong. I think Farm Sanctuary's position on the Downed Animal Act is wrong. And I didn't get letters explaining to me why I was wrong. I was just told, you disagree. You should never ever express disagreement. I mean, I remember there was an instance that came up in the '90s where Cleveland Amory, who was the Fund for Animals, Cleveland Amory headed Fund for Animals. He's now gone, but he's not dead. But Fund for Animals had a sanctuary in Texas that was being run by a guy who was involved in the meat business. And there were all sorts of concerns about the fact that these animals in the sanctuary were giving birth to offspring that were being slaughtered and things. I mean, there were all sorts of problems. And I remember, there was a Village Voice article that came out about the Black Beauty Ranch in Texas that was run by Fund for Animals. And I mean, it was well known within the movement that there were all sorts of problems with that, and those of us who criticized, I being one of them, what was going on at Black Beauty, were criticized by the movement for we should never air our dirty laundry in public. And my response was, well, isn't that exactly what we criticize the vivisectors for? That when we find something wrong, when we find that there's some vivisector who's doing some horrible thing, all the vivisectors rally around the guy who's done the bad thing, and we criticize them for doing that. Aren't we doing the same thing? And and I think that we really do need to have discourse about these things, but we're not allowed to. And in a sense, you can understand it. I mean, it's an opportunity cost that most of these organizations don't want to incur. I mean, to have these discussions, just gets in the way of their fundraising.
Sure.
So they don't want to have these discussions, so they don't. But, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be having these discussions, because we need to be having these discussions. So let me just tell the two of you now, if you think that you've been called divisive, get used to it, because you're going to get called divisive a lot more.
I'm fine with it. No problem.
Yep.
You know what I say? I'm divisive and proud.
Yeah, we got to live what we believe. So
absolutely, and I'm not in this thing to make friends. That's how I feel.
I mean, it's not that I particularly enjoy making enemies, because I don't. I'm actually a very, whatever people think, I'm a very friendly guy. But but when people like Newkirk say, well, I just don't understand why Gary, why he has to disagree so much. Why can't we just all work together? And the answer is because we're doing different things.
That's right.
My vision is very different from Ingrid's vision. And it's not a question of, why don't we all work together? Why don't we all bury the hatchet, forget the differences, and work together? The bottom line is we can't, because we're doing something very, very different. Just like if you go back to 19th century America and you look at the abolitionists and the regulations with respect to human slavery, they did not see themselves as working toward this, they didn't see themselves as the same group. The people who were in favor of abolition were not willing to support humane regulation of slavery. Similarly, they didn't see themselves as involved in the same enterprise. I do not see myself as involved in the same enterprise as Peter Singer. I see him doing something completely different. When he's talking about being a conscientious omnivore, I see him as involved in a fundamentally different enterprise from the one I'm involved with. It's not that I wish him any harm. I don't. I don't wish Newkirk any harm or anybody else any harm. That's not the point. The point is I just disagree with them, and what I'm involved with is a completely different enterprise.
Absolutely.